All right, thank you guys for coming to this screening and Q&A regarding Extreme by Design. It's a new documentary film that premiered early December? Yeah, December 11th premiered on PBS. So we're lucky enough today to have here Ralph King, the director, along with two people that are with him that are also part of the Stanford d.School, the Stanford Design School, which is one of the sort of biggest design thinking evangelists, I would say. I feel like you can't hear about design thinking without hearing about Stanford. So it's great to have them with us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll go right to the screening, and then have a Q&A afterwards with an open forum for everyone. So Extreme by Design, at a time of unprecedented global challenges, the under 30 millennial generation has every reason to be disengaged. Yet plenty of millennials are engaged. Call it the empathy revolution. It's a big Stanford thing. Extreme by Design, an hour-long documentary film, brings this revolution to life by following three Stanford University students that design and build products to meet basic needs of the world's poor. And I'll tell you in just a minute, expand on that about a program that our two other guests have designed on PBS Learning Media that's an extension of this experience and this lesson. So I'll get to tell you about that in a minute. And our director, Ralph, is a graduate of Stanford, an independent filmmaker and founder of Hawkview Pictures. Prior to filmmaking, he spent 25 years as a reporter for the Wall Street Journal and several national magazines, and he was twice nominated by Wall Street Journal editors for the Pulitzer Prize and won the National Association of Science Writers Science in Society Award and the California Governor's Media Award. And Ralph recently became a filmmaker, and you said you've been working on this one for about 4 years?
Yeah, right. The first 4 years before it all started.
There you go. So 4 years on this one. I think that you would say this is probably your first big one,
yeah.
Right? So, and so now on to our two other guests. One is Leticia Cavagnaro. She comes from the world of science, where she acquired a couple of degrees. I like how you said that. A couple of degrees. No big deal. Strong analytical skills, which she balances with creative thinking, and the ability to learn from failed experiments. Venturing outside of the biology lab, Leticia found that designing learning experiences was just as challenging and even more rewarding. Leticia is now is adjunct faculty at the School of Engineering's Stanford Technology Ventures program, and which director? Deputy Director, there we go, recently changed. Deputy Director of the National Center for Engineering Pathways to Innovation, known as Epicenter. And as a co-lecturer on the Creativity and Innovation course, which here you guys might know as CSI, she gets to witness the journey of students as they develop their creative confidence and go on accomplishing amazing things, which you guys will definitely see in this next hour. And our other guest is Melissa Pelochino. I love that last name. That's such a good one. Fellow at the Stanford d.School, her current focus is on redesigning the professional development experience for K-12 teachers and administrators, which again you'll see in this PBS Learning Media. Melissa is a former teacher and administrator in low-income schools, and after learning about design thinking in 2007, she began her mission to integrate the design thinking process and mindsets into K-12 schools all over the world. There's some really interesting stories that follow that as well. Now, to tell you about the PBS Learning Media, would you probably call it Extreme by Design, Watch and Do? Did I get that right? So the idea of this is it's an interactive experience on PBS Learning Media, which is a resource for teachers, and it's designed for 4th through 12th grade students to be completed after watching the Extreme by Design documentary. And for example, the first episode, Being an Innovator, helps students think and act like innovators using the design thinking approach. Scenes from this documentary are used to illustrate concepts, and a protagonist acts as a guide who provides instructions and explanations to the students. And that's narrated by all three or one of the students that we see in the film?
One of the students.
Just one of the students we see in the film. He narrates this whole learning experience, which teachers then take to their classroom to expand on this Extreme by Design film, which I think is a very cool way of not only learning something, but then putting it into action. So we'll go ahead and watch the film now, and then we'll have a Q&A right afterwards.
How do you come up with the universe of potential solutions? I didn't see anything on that. What's the winnowing process that you go to take that large universe down to a small subset that you're then going to proceed to invest the time and effort and how can that be replicable? Because I think that's something that would be useful to take from this.
Sure. So I should say I do not teach this specific class, and there's a variability amongst the different d.School classes, but for sure that the process is not proprietary and it's all shared. Many of the resources that we use for teaching are shared on the web. Mostly, in a nutshell, the design thinking process would start with identifying problems from the user perspective, as I think that came through in the film. For coming up with ideas, there's many techniques that you can use, but mostly is a very simple concept of going beyond the first right answer, right? And I think that in most, when we teach mostly engineers or other technical students, we teach them to, we give them a very well-defined problem, and we teach them to come up with a solution. We should push them to think of many possible solutions. So just that simple concept is the start of getting them to think beyond the first right answer. Do you want to add?
I would just add, in terms of criteria for selection, it ranges. Sometimes criteria for selection is given by the instructors and sometimes it's not. I would say most importantly, it's what's feasible. If you're having to actually create something that you can make, either an experience or a product, and also what meets the need that you identified earlier on in the process in the best way. And so students do brainstorm. There were some short clips in the movie. They said trainstorming as sort of a play on brainstorming, and some other short parts where they were throwing Post-its up with a whole bunch of different ideas. But as Leticia said, there's a lot of different strategies for getting outside the box of what's possible into really wild ideas, and then criteria for narrowing that down and selecting it, and there's several.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would just add to that, defining the problem, as I guess we all know, is often more important than finding the solution. So the Indonesian group that was on this quixotic adventure that they didn't realize they were looking for the wrong thing initially, the partner in those countries, the NGOs, will give you an assignment, but often you end up way over here in the process of figuring out something you can solve, or something that's the right size for a 6-month course, or the little blue sleeping bag, the Embrace. Their initial assignment was to come up with a cheaper in-hospital incubator, and within a matter of days, when they were out in the field, they realized that 95% of the babies are born out in the rural villages and no electricity, so they basically walked away from that partner and came up with that design. So problem definition, I think is also a long and important process.
Hi, thanks again. I was curious about, it occurred to me that, the local people in Indonesia or wherever would be motivated to help solve these problems, and maybe they have no time or resources, but there must be bright people there too. Is there effort to transition some of the solutions that way instead of, say, to Walmart or wherever, and help continue the projects?
Yeah, this movie is set up as a west to east kind of solution, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be the other way, or west to west and east to east kind of thing. That the problem solvers should ideally come from the culture in which they live. Stanford, for one, has an organization called the Seed Institute. They got a big gift from a local couple that is now setting up d.School-like innovation labs in places like Ghana and Myanmar, and I think 8 of the countries they plan to create for local entrepreneurs, to learn the methodologies and to incubate their companies. And then sometimes the partners in these countries will come back to Stanford and bring their staffs with them. Like the group, you saw the red treadle pump there in Myanmar at the early stage. Well, that organization, Proximity Design, sent a big group back with our teams to study the school and the process, and then have now carried that back there. So, there's an objection raised that this is kind of seems a little neo-colonial and just another version of charity. But there's no reason why it can't be something that operates locally. In fact, one of the projects was if you saw that map set in Arizona at an Apache reservation. So within American culture, obviously, there's lots of room for these kinds of projects, and they happen here. But this particular class tends to go overseas because of the way it's set up.
Yeah, and in fact, this film is serving as inspiration for exactly that to happen. We're working with a school in India of 4th and 5th grade students who saw the film, and Ralph was there through Skype to answer some Q&A. And then Leticia and I are going to be leading them through their own design challenge later next week, actually. So the film is serving as inspiration to empower people, children all over the world to solve their own problems.
Sir.
So Ralph, how did you decide how to tell this story? Did you just follow these 3 groups around with the camera, or did you look at some other groups and already have an outline of what you were looking for? Or?
I was... The question is why I decided to do this particular story. I was working at the Stanford Business School when I heard about this class, and I spent a year auditing the course, or a 6-month cycle, and so I was, as part of that, went out with one of the student teams I mentioned earlier to Myanmar. And I was, filmmakers and journalists weren't welcome in Myanmar at that time, so I was a student. And it was like day 4 of the trip, and I was feeling very discouraged because I hadn't had any startling observations to contribute to my team. And so I was kind of shuffling through the town, and I noticed a family sitting in a pagoda in a meditation room. They had come in for the bazaar, the county fair that was happening in the town, and we're about to leave. I sat down and asked if I could interview them. They said sure. I started firing all my journalistic questions at them, and about madly scribbling in my notebook. And about 15 minutes into this interview, I looked up, and there, in addition to the 6 people, had 35 other people had just glided in like silently and sat down and were watching this whole thing going on with this crazy Westerner. And in that moment, I just put my book down and I leaned back, and I just, I was filled with ecstasy. I really felt for the first time in 25 years as a journalist that I understood the difference between gathering facts and observing with an open heart. And this sudden appearance of people, like totally unbeknownst to me, was like, for me, this kind of trumpets blaring from the heavens of how much I exclude, how much experience I exclude, or tend to exclude, and it just, I don't know, it was like discovering a new capacity in myself. And so for the next 2, I don't really describe it well, the next 2 days I was like walking on air, and I thought, well, if it's having this kind of, being even, auditing this class is having this kind of effect on me, imagine what it's doing for these 20-somethings who have skin in the game and actually have to produce something for people that they meet. And so I felt like there was a powerful element to it, and it was kind of like Pam said, where the boundaries just collapse, and in that moment she felt like she just had to do this. Well, that's kind of the way I felt about the story, and so I'm, I guess that's why I did it. And I guess I would also like to say that now that that the film is made, it's become something else, and that's partly why Melissa and Leticia are here today, because there is a kind of movement in education now to bring design thinking and these methods more into the mainstream, more into young people's lives in schools. And also into companies. I mean, I know here at Google, it's a fairly common or fairly well-known thing, but in other parts of the country, less so. But beginning, we see little beginnings. So after making the film, I came to my friends and said, how do we get this in front of young people? Young people don't watch PBS, which is where it broadcasts. And so we started talking about a workshop and how could we, incorporate the film in a workshop. And so we did little clips, and we had this 90-minute workshop, and that was great. But we did it in some schools. But how do we scale it? And so then PBS offered this opportunity to put on their teacher portal something online. And so Melissa and Leticia, God bless them, took the film and created this wonderful hour-long exercise, like a press play exercise, that takes young people in the classroom through the basic elements, the steps of design thinking. So it gives them a flavor and a taste of it, what it's like. And so what keeps me up at night now is figuring out ways like this to scale design thinking education. We're at a moment in our education system where the Common Core is coming in, which is much more process-oriented rather than content-oriented. So it's a kind of an inflection point that is, timely, and we're, I actually would welcome any ideas that you have if you've experienced the scaling of a new kind of concept here at Google, and how that's done. I'm really looking and searching for answers to that right now.
I would love to know about the challenges that you guys had trying to get something like the CSI process onto this online workshop for students, because here it's a few hours of hands-on in the classroom stuff that we do. So how'd you guys get that into scale, and what were the challenges?
So I should say that before attempting to do this module for K-12, I had approached Ralph, having seen the movie, and I did a massive online course on design thinking, and I used some of the clips. I selected some of the clips to illustrate some of the challenges. So I do believe that you can translate this type of experiential learning into an online experience. You just have to not be literal, right? So when we think about an online resource, we think, okay, there's going to be a lecture, a video of a lecture, and then a quiz that basically like quizzes you on whether you were paying attention to the lecture, right? But if the way I designed that course was completely different, I thought, how can I design something that is very personal for each learner, and use the metaphor of kind of like a choose your own adventure book, right? That so you would, according to what you were seeing and what you were answering, and like no right answer quizzes, you would be pointed to different parts of the materials that were meaningful to you, right? So when we approach doing this module, one of the challenges I would say is that you want to present the learner with a meaningful challenge, but it's something that they can see the human aspect of it. So one of the things that we struggled really with was defining the right challenge to give the students, and not something that was directly coming from the movie, so they already saw what the student's solution had been, and they would like gravitate towards doing something similar, right? So we took a challenge of one of the teams that was not portrayed in the movie, what was just mentioned at the beginning, as one of the main challenges. Do you want to?
Yeah, I would say that was definitely a challenge. Another challenge we had is sort of providing an experiential learning opportunity for students, being mindful that teachers need to manage their class, and that this may not be the type of learning and teaching that a teacher might feel comfortable with. So trying to find the right balance between the giving or delivering of material and content and the experience that the students would be having, I think was definitely challenging. We're in a time right now where teachers were taught in a way that's very different than we're now asking them to teach. And so being mindful of that gap and sort of finding the right balance there was very challenging, and how we sort of answered that for ourselves was providing a lot of scaffolding for the students. So for example, we ask them to identify a bunch of needs that a particular character that we present might have, but then we present an actual need that we want the whole group to solve for all together. So we gave them the freedom to sort of generate their own ideas, but then we kept it sort of whole class as they moved through the process, which enabled the teacher, we felt, to manage a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. In a way, you need to kind of like the research needs to be a learning experience for the students, but also for the teacher, right? Because we wanted this, if this is going to scale, this is going to go into the hands of a teacher who is not knowledgeable about design thinking, so they might not be comfortable with being the facilitator. So what we did was we took one of the students, Darvill, that appears in the movie, is one of the water storage team students, and he was the facilitator. So this particular module, or one instance of the module, was just, as Ralph said, just like press play and go. So you would have kind of like the teacher on the screen saying, and now we're going to do this, and the teacher would be kind of like the facilitator on the side, providing materials, and in a way giving the teacher the opportunity to observe the students in action and seeing like the interaction with this in-screen facilitator, right? And this is an experiment. We really don't know, and we're eager to find out how this works in schools, and hopefully we'll be able to go into some classrooms and see how it works.
Leticia's modest. Her MOOC that she created at Stanford attracted thousands and thousands of students who actually completed it, which is also with MOOCs not that common, and had some really amazing feedback and experiences from it. So, you know, the scaling of design thinking is happening in a number of ways, these folks are among the pioneers at it.
So in the movie, actually in the class, I didn't see many like design students with the design backgrounds. So I saw like the professors who are from like technology background or from like a psychology background. So I wonder how much effort made by the design professors or students with the design background, and how many people had design backgrounds get involved into this process?
Well, usually in that course, there are maybe a quarter or maybe not quite that many of the students are from the design. There's a design program, a joint program in design at the graduate level at Stanford. It's part of the mechanical engineering department, I think, and so there's a lot of dialogue between the design department and the d.School, which is not a department itself. It's just where people come together to intermingle, and so, you know, I'd say anywhere from 10 to 25% of the students had a design or were currently in a design program, but they had all around them these instructors who were very immersed in design process. So, but as we said at the very beginning, very few had ever made anything, you know, in their lives, or designed anything. So it's I think the idea is creating this attitude that if I see a problem in the world, I can fix it. You know, kind of forget the whole idea of design. It's a kind of an optimism, and like I can figure out how to get the answer to this problem if I care enough about it.
Mm-hmm. I would say that students with a design background are just, for the purpose of the d.School, just one more discipline that contributes to a multidisciplinary team. But we really think design thinking is a much broader language for creative problem definition and solving, and we're all designers in a way, right? And like getting that attitude, as Ralph said, into every discipline.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Design thinking and design is basically different things, but I wonder, like, for the students in this class, this extreme class, did they get any design skill trainings? Because like during the whole process, they need to kind of do the research, do the like interviews. So there are a lot of like design skills or research skills involved in the process. So I want to accept the design thinking. Did they get any other trainings about the specific skills?
Each class has its own sort of ways that they convey the design thinking process and methodology. So I can't, I mean, you could probably speak better than us because we don't teach that particular class. But I can say in the class that we're teaching right now at the D.School, we do teach the skills required for the design thinking process alongside the mindsets and sort of attitudes as well in a way that's very experiential, and then they go out into the field and they apply them. So there definitely is training along the way throughout any design thinking course. And I would also add that the D.School is not actually a school. By design, it doesn't issue degrees on purpose. They didn't want to have a space that like the creatives are over here and everybody else is over here. It's specifically a place where people from all different disciplines and backgrounds come together. And sort of one of the cornerstones of design thinking is that interdisciplinary sort of like crossbreeding of ideas and perspectives, and that's what yields the most creative and innovative results.
And I would, building on that, is a place where people come for like different amounts of times and involvement, right? So it's not like, you know, you have a set amount of classes and that you have to complete to be a D.School graduate. You do not get that, but students can come and take a class and get a sense of that, and then go back to their disciplines and apply some of that. Or they can become kind of like D.School junkies, I would say, and like come and take like 8-9 classes, and to the point that becomes like a really great part of what they do and what they will do in the future.
And these two, together with Frederick, are teaching a class in creativity right now. And for 40 spots, you had, what, 150 applicants?
About 100. We had to actually teach the class twice this year because last year we had 200 applicants for 40 spots. So that's why we're now teaching it twice.
So the demand is just far outstripping the supply of this sort of thing right now.
And it's a class that actually is not required, and in some cases it competes with the requirements. So some students are struggling to like, oh, I want to take this class, but I have to take units for my degree, and so what do I do, right? So it's a great testament of like this revolution of like the students like feel this need to acquire these sets of skills and mindsets to be creative problem solvers, and we're trying to find more ways to spread that across Stanford in different ways, not just like with standalone classes, but how can we embed that in every class in the fabric of Stanford, right?
So over the weekend, I had the fortune of being at D.School, attending the bootleg bootcamp, and I wanted to totally appreciate the school and the great material, and not just the material, but the D-leaders, and I really learned a lot, and I totally appreciate that. And I just like Rob said, I felt like I was floating on air. There was just so much energy, so much creativity. So thanks, and keep up the great work.
Thank you for coming, and you probably met one of our course assistant was one of the D leaders, Ben Baldwin. These are students who are now learning to teach design thinking. So we call an open call for people to come to a D.School and go through a basic training, and the students are teaching. So thank you.
I think that was actually the perfect way to finish. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you coming out. So thank you.
Thank you.